welcome to another episode of Movie Howl. Yes, we're not taking a 2-month break or whatever in between. We're actually going to get back at it. And this time, I, Ryan, am joined by a big upset here, my co-host Joe.
What?
And we are going to be discussing an older movie that I wanted to talk about that we've been kind of quoting back and forth, at least from the trailer.
1987 classic.
Monster Squad, or The Monster Squad, I should say.
Right, The Monster Squad.
Not just any Monster Squad, The Monster Squad. So, the basic premise, since it seems pretty likely that people out there probably haven't heard of this before, because most folks don't seem to have. It's not like a cult classic or anything.
Not really.
It's a movie that centers around kids, as a lot of 80s movies do.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids are in a monster club, and they grow suspicious that there are real monsters out there in the world doing monster stuff, and that nobody's going to believe them if they try to warn people about it. And
they're not wrong. I mean, they're kids. That's how that works.
Yeah.
Kid tries to run up and tell you, "Oh, there's a monster in my closet, under the bed." And parents don't believe that stuff. That's, like the old Beastie Boys song. Parents just don't understand where whatever it was from. But I mean, it's just it is what it is. It was a very big trope back during that time.
Yeah, like it's up to us because nobody's going to believe us.
Absolutely.
It was in this. It was in Hocus Pocus. This movie reminded me a lot of Hocus Pocus.
I can see that
because it's a similar kind of thing. It's kids kind of on their own against something that nobody else believes is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, Joseph.
Yes, sir.
What did you think? I know we quoted Wolfman's Got Nards a lot.
Wolfman's Got Nards.
It's got a really fun trailer.
It does. I'd love if we could play the music that's at the end of this movie in the beginning of this podcast. That would be fantastic. Like I don't know who in the world could possibly be bothered by that. I mean, I know there's copyrights and crap. I mean, but whatever. This was a movie, you suggested it, and it was one that I was like, oh, this is what he's picking. As I'd heard about it. I remember when it came out when I was a kid, and I didn't see it. And I had this. I went and picked it up from the library. Shout out to St. Louis County Library. It's fantastic. If you don't go, you should go. If you don't read.
I mean, if you're in like San Antonio, you don't have to come to St. Louis County to go to that library. You can probably use your own.
I mean, technically, that's probably true. Whatever. Mine's better, but whatever. So I had this for a while before I actually sat down and watched it. You and I tried to watch it, but I couldn't figure out a way to turn on the subtitles. If there are even subtitles, if there are even subtitles on the DVD. But you recommended just plugging my headphones into the controller as I watched it on my PS4, which is what I ended up doing because some of it's one of those movies where, and I really dislike this with movies, where the any action scenes are super loud or the music is super loud, and then the voice, any talking is really low and hard to hear, so you have to have it turned up really loud. That does bug me in movies, but I did that. It was fine. I got to hear everything. I think I liked this more than I thought I was going to. My favorite thing about this movie is the concept of this movie. Bringing all of these huge, I'd say at the time, you're bringing together, because you had in the early stages of movies, you had Dracula, you had Wolfman, you had the Mummy, Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon. You had all of these creature feature movies that were individually a whole genre in and of themselves. And this is a movie that says, you know what? We're going to say one of them is the leader, and he's going to bring all of them together to try and rule the world, to try and start the revolution, and we're going to take over. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was an interesting concept. Now, this movie is written by Shane Black. If any of you know that name, you know that name because he wrote The Predator, old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. He was Ooh, this says it's Predator, the Predator from 2018. I didn't see that. I didn't hear good things.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure he played one of the characters in the original Predator movie, but he's written some things. The The Nice Guys. He did a screenplay for Iron Man 3. Let's see, The Long Kiss Goodnight, which was a decent movie. The Last Action Hero, The Last Boy Scout,
Hmm.
original Lethal Weapon. Like those are not small things. Like so his name, I when I saw Shane Black, I was like, "Oh, I know that name," and that's why I knew that name. But I really did like the concept of this movie. To say Dracula, I think rightfully so, is going to be the leader of this group and that he's going to try and bring people together. And it wasn't anything more than you thought it was going to be. There were some things in it that surprised me, that I really enjoyed. There's a scene with the character's name is Horace, but throughout the entire movie, they call him the fat kid. Even his friends refer to him as the fat kid.
Yep.
A fat kid. Like, and he's not like ridiculously obese. He's just the fat kid. Kind of like what's his name from the Goonies who does the truffle shuffle?
I know. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought of. Like, he's
Right,
not
the
really
same
that
level.
big.
They just didn't have him do that in this movie. But there's a scene where they first introduced the character of Horace, and he's getting picked on by, I think it's the older brother from, oh god, the TV show with Fred Savage that has just abandoned me now.
Fred Savage.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Wonder Years?
Yes, the older brother from the Wonder Years.
Okay.
He plays a bully in this, and he's bullying this kid, and then all of a sudden, this like super cool kid,
Well, yeah, wearing
rolls up,
white socks and loafers.
right, in a leather jacket on a not even a BMX bike, just like some bike. He rolls up and he like lifts up his shoe and he strikes a match off the heel to light a cigarette. Oh my god. And he makes that guy who knocked the candy bar out of Horace's hand and steps on it. He makes him eat it.
Yeah.
He's like, Horace, that's my friend Horace right there. Like you have no idea how he knows him. You
Yeah.
have no idea where the connection is, and they don't need to go into that. It really reminded me of the movie Hal favorite, the raved over
Mhm.
Hawk and Rev, Vampire Hunters.
Okay.
Like it reminded me of a kid version of that.
Yeah.
Like it's just a campy, it knows what it's not trying to be anything than it is, anything more than it is. And it was fun. I enjoyed some of the things they threw in. Like you have this, this super tough kid who's gonna join the monster club.
Yeah.
Like why? Why would he want to? But he does, and you see him in the clubhouse, and the clubhouse is across, the way from this window that has this, high school girl in it, and she's like, he's got his binoculars. It's very McFly.
Yeah.
It's got a very McFly vibe to it as he's in the tree trying to, scope out the girls, Peeping Tom-esque. But you couldn't do that stuff nowadays.
No, there's a lot in this movie that you couldn't do now.
Oh man, that would be considered toxic masculinity. Sorry, young boys in middle school want to look at naked girls. That's not anything new throughout the course of human history. Like that's what boys of that age start to become interested in.
Yeah, and I guess if you think that your son, as long as they're heterosexual, if you think that they're not, like if they walked by a window and saw a girl changing or like dancing around in some skimpy outfit, that they wouldn't stop and look, you're probably fooling yourself.
You are fooling yourself. Like Jeremiah, my my best friend made a bet with my son like 2 or 3 years ago at this point that by the time he's 17, he's gonna like girls. Because at the time he was like, "Oh, girls are gross. I don't want anything to do with girls." And my son George is gonna owe him $20. Unless he's gay, and then Jeremiah's going to owe him $20. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to turn out. But based on having lived with him my entire life, I'm pretty sure Jeremiah is going to be the one who George owes $20 to.
Yeah.
Just saying. But that's human nature right there. And so you can call it whatever you want, but back in the day, 1987, they weren't afraid to show that real life sort of situation. That's what
Yeah.
would be happening if there
And
was an opportunity for a little boy to have some binoculars and look at a girl changing because she wasn't smart enough to close the curtains when you take off your clothes. Like that's not hard. Like if I'm going to change, I'm going to close the curtains. That's not a big leap to go to.
yeah, the back of my house faces a hill with like nothing that can see in, and I still close the curtains at night. Like I know nothing and no one can, like there's a fox or a skunk or something out there. It's like, oh, look at the fat guy changing. I don't know.
See, I don't care about that. I'm like, hey, if you're gonna looking at me as I'm changing clothes, you know what? That's on you. I'm sorry. I'll just apologize now.
I like that they don't explain, like you're saying, why the cool kid is friends with them. Like
Yep.
why he's friends with Horace. It kind
Yeah.
of reminds me of like Back to the Future. You don't know why Doc and Marty are friends. Like
Exactly.
it
Very. Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah, there's no like good reason why these two are hanging around each other, but they are, and it's just like, do we need an explanation? Nah. Well, okay, you can just accept it. And then why would he join this monster club thing? It's like, well, because he knows that he can see this girl from there that he likes, and he gets a chance to talk to her later in the movie, and he finds out that it's the older sister of this one of the kids in the club. And yeah, there's a lot of like insults, like very what would be considered homophobic insults,
Oh my
or
gosh.
slurs, or whatever the right term for that is now. And I mean, that's just one of those things that's a product of its time. That's
Yep.
just the way they talk. They would still be saying the same stuff today. They would just be using different terminology, because it's whatever.
Absolutely.
But it was one of those things where it just like kind of surprised me at first to hear it. The stuff that they were saying about like the principal and the stuff that they were saying about each other and the insults that they were throwing out. It's like, man, this is like, it's so odd because for such a long time we were on this trajectory where like you could say or do anything in a movie, and now we have like completely gone the other way. I mean, and
Oh
that's
my
like,
god.
that seems to be just how society goes. Like you go through periods every, I don't know, so often, so many decades where like, oh no, we need to be more proper, and then no, we need to loosen up, and we're just kind of like on the upward swing on being sort of uptight about stuff. Not saying that we
And
should be
it's but
allowed
it's
to make whatever insults, but like just showing that this kid doesn't need to be completely altruistic for this. Like
yeah,
he can have his own motivations. They can be selfish. They can be whatever. They can say whatever they want and represent like jackass little kids accurately, and it's
which they did.
mostly fine.
Yeah.
I like that they're afraid of this German guy,
That was great.
and I was looking him up on IMDb, and his character name in the movie is Scary German Guy.
Of
Like they didn't actually
course
give
it
him a
is.
name.
That's how they refer to him the whole time. And he ended up being great.
He was probably my favorite part. There's a scene with him. There are a couple scenes that are really, really good. That I really was surprised by, and one of them was with him. So I guess
Was
I'll
it,
go ahead and, well,
was it
do you
when they
want
were
to?
in the house eating pie?
It was, yeah, it was like that. Really, the whole sequence with him. So there's a point where the kids are trying to stop this thing that's happening, and Van Helsing tried to stop this thing from happening like years ago. Whatever, 100 years ago, to something like that. And they managed to get a hold of Van Helsing's journal, but it's all written in German. So they end up standing in front of the scary German guy's house. And they're like, what do we do? What do we ask him? What if he doesn't speak English? And I think fat kid's like, how do you say please don't murder me in German? And then they just hear this voice say it, and the German guy standing there right
Yes.
next to him.
That was great.
And then it's him with the knife, and shot gets wider, he's cutting pie and all this stuff. But for me, the scene that I really, or the part of that scene that I really liked was, he's saying as they're leaving, he's standing in his foyer. He's like, I bet you guys were scared of me. You probably thought I was like a vampire or something. But look, I have a reflection. I wouldn't if I was a vampire. And they're like, oh, you know an awful lot about monsters. And he goes, come to think of it, I guess I do. And as he closes the door, you see the like Holocaust numbers tattooed on his wrist.
Right?
Like they don't talk about it at all.
Nope.
He has some like American or at least Allied military memorabilia in his house,
Yeah.
but they just show that, and it's like this little thing. It's like, oh my god, did they really just throw that into this kids movie.
They did. And things like that are what it kind of elevates a movie like this more than you expect it to. If
Mhm.
you notice that stuff. It's one of those things that's small and very easy to miss. Now, I will say one of the things I looked up when I was looking up a little trivia, a little facts about this.
Mhm.
Apparently, according to the director, Fred Decker, Shane Black's first draft of the screenplay was so huge that the opening of the film featured Van Helsing, accompanied by Zeppelins and hundreds of men on horseback
Hmm.
storming Dracula's castle. But Decker stated that this sequence would have cost more than the final budget of the film itself.
Yeah.
So obviously it wasn't in there.
Yeah, because the actual opening is like a dozen guys with crossbows.
Right? It's so smooth. It's almost like the opening of Shrek.
Okay, yeah, kind of where they storm his swamp.
Right. That might be where they got it. They were like, we're just basically going to do that. With torches and pitchforks, and Shrek's going to be like, lick his fingers and put one out. Boo. But this was, I did. I thought when you first suggested it, oh my God, this is another one of those Ryan picks. Like, why would he pick this? But I'm glad you did, because it was one of those that it came from back when I was a kid. One of my favorite parts about this was all the nostalgia that I felt, not because of what they were allowed to get away with saying and doing in the movie, but just seeing some of the stuff from the movie that reminded me of my childhood.
Like a 1 hour photo.
Right. Like the things the kids had in their room or school or whatever it was. And I would see things and be like, I remember that stuff. But unlike movies nowadays, when they do remakes or when they do things, they're doing it to cash in on nostalgia.
Yeah.
I just got to enjoy it because that's the time this movie came out.
Yeah. Yeah. It,
So that
it
was
was,
nice.
yeah, it was kind of funny watching it say present day and being like, wow, present day is 34 years ago, whatever.
Yeah, sure is. Doesn't make me feel old or anything.
Yeah. So there was that scene. I really liked Frankenstein's monster.
Yes.
He would have been another decent choice for the leader of the group if they had gone with the book version as opposed to like the old movie version where he's kind of like almost like a zombie. Because in the books he's very intelligent and articulate and like he knows what's going on and he has a plan. But Dracula is the only one that's like evil and
Yes.
wants to do evil. Like the rest of them just do their thing. Like Wolfman's, Frankenstein's monster just is, the swamp thing. He's just
See,
kind
and
of
it wasn't okay. One of the things I liked was that Wolfman, he didn't want to be Wolfman. Like he knew when he was in human form, he was like, "You need to stop me. You need to." There's a scene where he's in a police station, and you need to lock me up because this is going to happen.
yeah.
Where he came from, he all of a sudden he was there. Like
He's just
Dracula is
yeah.
in this plane somehow. He's like there's two pilots in the plane, pilot and co-pilot, and they're talking about transporting dead bodies. And it's the scene that kind of introduces the Dracula we know in this movie.
Mhm.
And he knocks a couple of coffins out, or at least one, a couple, I want to say. Maybe it's
It's
just the one is Frankenstein.
yeah, it's a crate that has Frankenstein's monster in it, yeah. And
Right. And
what
then,
happens is he like scares this guy and they mention right before that, like the guy's like, I wanted to be a pilot. Now I'm here with you flying this like World War II bomber and delivering,
right?
junk to people or whatever. And they're like, yeah, but at least there's no passengers to complain. He's like, yeah, you're right. I guess this is a pretty good job. So they explain that it's a bomber. And when he's
They
like
do.
going to investigate what this noise is, Dracula appears and he pulls that lever to open the bomb bay doors and it drops the. You would think that they would seal those if they were not going to use it to drop bombs anymore. You wouldn't want to
Right?
like. That's the lever that drops the floor of the plane out. Like, well, then could you please remove that?
Right?
could you not allow that to happen?
So
I don't see that as a necessary part of my delivery business.
another little piece of trivia on, if you notice, on the side of the plane it said Browning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently that was a nod to the director Todd Browning, who directed Dracula in 1931.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yep, and I didn't know it either. I don't even think I noticed it on the plane, but I thought that was an interesting thing. But this movie, it's bringing together. It's what they tried to do here recently with I Frankenstein, Dracula 3000, Mummy or The Mummy,
I
whatever it was
Frankenstein.
with Tom Cruise that came out.
Yeah, yeah.
And
They
they're
tried to start a monster movie universe.
absolutely. And because everything, you know what? Screw you, Marvel. A little bit. Screw you, Marvel, because now everybody wants to do that. I mean, I know Star Wars kind of started it, and Star Trek had their thing, but Star Trek was based on TV, and then they had the movies, and some of the movies weren't great. Some of the movies were good,
Mm-hmm.
but Marvel really, really did this franchise thing. And so everybody wanted to get in on that bandwagon. Now, I saw I Frankenstein, and I didn't think it was terrible.
That was the
I
Aaron Eckhart one, or
It
whatever his name is.
was. I did not see the Tom Cruise movie. I did not see the Vampire 3000 movie, which, to be fair, the Tom Cruise movie, when I saw the preview, I'm like, this looks terrible. But when I saw the Dracula 3000 one, which, just for the record, so it's caught for all time, me saying this, that is a terrible name for a movie. How dare you? When you're referring to Dracula, that's what you're going to say. It's not like when they came out with the comic book of Spider-Man 2099. No, that was okay. But Dracula 3000, that's just terrible. And screw you guys. You could have come up with something way better than that. But I thought that looked good. One of the reasons, I like the actor who played him. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but I know I like that actor. I think it was the same guy who played Gaston in the live action version of Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
But I don't know, man. Trying to start that franchise, like this movie already did it. I mean, it didn't go anywhere. It didn't turn into 4, 5, 6 movies after this, and it didn't need to.
Yeah, they kind of left the door open to it. I mean, just a little bit by having it be like, yeah, we're the kind of like Ghostbusters, because
Yes.
they have this end where it's like we're the Monster Squad, and it's like you could have more, but there don't have to be more, and
Right.
there weren't.
Like the monsters at the end get sucked into this alternate dimension, and because they got the MacGuffin. Once they got the MacGuffin, which was the amulet, and they were able to do the thing that stopped the bad guys from doing their thing. And it was just that's basic movie 101 kind of stuff. And it wasn't like, I remember movies when I was a kid, like The Neverending Story, The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, classic movies, in my opinion, that really shaped how I viewed movies, or at least movies that involved kids and stories that revolved around kids. I like those movies. There's one coming out here. I remember mentioning it to you, with Ryan Reynolds, that revolves around a kid and how it's just going to be a straight to Netflix kind of a thing. And I think it looks good, but I'll have to watch it to see if it actually holds up to what I'm hoping for. Like, I like that stuff. Like when we reviewed The Golden Compass, I watched it years ago, and I liked it more than after you and I watched it, and I watched, a little more critical eye with you and I
Yeah.
doing this. But I like movies like that. I liked them back and you should. When you're that age, when you're the age for those movies, like even Karate Kid, movies like that are for young adults. I mean, even younger than my son's age. He's 11. This is that movie for him. This is an 11-year-old movie, like those ones that I just mentioned that were classics from when I was a kid. It just, I don't put this in the realm of those that I mentioned, because they were more fantastical and the world was just a whole different thing. But this is at least in the realm of E.T. Maybe not as good as E.T. It wasn't directed by Steven Spielberg. I mean, obviously, but it was just fun. If you're a kid at that age and you watch this movie, you're probably going to have fun with this movie.
I agree that it was a really fun movie, but I think that maybe one of the problems with it might have been that it was a little bit too adult for the time it came out and for the crowd that they were aiming it towards. Some, like I just was saying before, some of the insults that they throw out are a little mature. Some of the
Bit.
concepts are a little bit mature. So the culmination of what they have to do is a virgin has to read this like spell in German, and they get the girl, the hot chick that the cool kid's been like just drooling over the whole movie, and they ask her.
Fantastic.
They have a really hard time asking her if she is or isn't, and she's reading the thing and finally gets through it, and the German guy's like, I don't know how you got through that, but you did. Like, yeah. And then nothing happens, and they're like, are you really a virgin? And she's like, well, there was Steve, but he doesn't count. And the kid's like, what do you mean doesn't count? And so they
That
grab
was
like the
a
little
fantastic moment. That was
yeah,
so good.
and they grab the little girl, and they're like, what about him? Could he be they're like, he's old. And she's like, you could ask him.
Oh my god. So I actually I really liked that.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that part. That
I like.
she does it, she gets through it, and then, well, yeah, but it was this guy. He doesn't count. And like, well, you can not count him all you want. Doesn't what? Like,
Yeah,
that was really good. But one thing I wanted to bring up before I forget, it did the thing that all movies have been accused of doing for years at this point. It's when you talk about an old trope, this one has it. They killed the black guy.
yeah.
The only guy who I saw die, I was like, oh man. Like,
Well,
Dracula blows up the cop car he's in with a stick of dynamite. Like, it got real at that moment.
He's the only person we care about that dies that we see. Because one of my favorite scenes is Dracula just mowing through people. It's Dracula just walking in the middle of the street. Yep. He does not care what's going on. People are shooting at him. They're trying to like hit him with nightsticks and whatever, and he's just wrecking fools.
Yes,
as
he
you
is.
Would say. I mean, it's so like I really enjoyed that. I knew that part was coming. I knew when it was coming, and it's like, yeah, that's what would happen because it's Dracula,
right?
But yeah, that the cop, the partner, I really liked him and the kid's dad, the one that was the cop. Yes. Who ends up being the first adult who like really believes him because he sees the stuff that's going on. He talks to the Wolfman. Like he's that's how the Wolfman's introduced. Like he's being called in because there's this guy at the station saying that he's a werewolf and all this stuff, and they wind up shooting him. But yeah, I love the like banter between those two. The like, I notice things like that. I'm a very good policeman. Like when he's rushing to the house and he's like, do you know you're doing 120 miles an hour? I notice things like that. I'm a very good policeman.
Yeah, that was good. That was. They had a little bit of that buddy cop thing going on there. I did find it a little I don't know. One of the parts that bothered me a little bit is so cop married him and the mom, and they're the parents of one of the boys who's involved in all this. Mm-hmm. But there's a little bit of a backstory with them. Like they're having issues because him not being around, like he's a cop, and the wife wants him to be there more. But I'm sorry, when you marry a police officer, not just a beat cop, he's a detective. He can get called away at any moment. And regardless of what plans you had, he can't just be like, oh, sorry, guys. I'm going to have a nice evening with my wife. We're going to have dinner, and we're going to go out, and it's going to be great, or we're going to counseling, or whatever it was. Like, you have to accept the fact when you marry this person, it's like if you were to marry somebody in the Army or in the reserves, and they get called away. Like, that's what they are. They have to go. They made a commitment to that, and you have to, as the partner, you have to support them in that. And I understand that it's hard. That is a sacrifice that both sides have to make, not just the man, not just the woman. There's a sacrifice there, and they don't go into a lot of detail of it. It is part of the story, just a little bit, but it's a thing that couples have to go through, and it's hard. It's hard to have to deal with that kind of thing, but as the wife in this particular instance, if he's the detective and you're the wife, or reverse, she's the detective and you're the husband, you have to let that go. Hey, you're out helping people, you're out saving lives or avenging, like somebody died, and so you have to go figure out what happened, and get closure for a family who lost someone, you have to let that go. And so when I see that stuff, when I see the other side of that being upset, well, you're not staying with me and you're not, well, yeah, that's my job.
Well, and he has that attitude too.
But he
He's
does,
like, I have to go.
right?
Like there's nothing I can do about it.
He could quit
Yeah.
and
But
go do something else, I guess.
I like that when I like him a lot. I like that he has this kind of relationship with his son. You know, like he pulls out a cigarette and the kid's like, I thought you quit. And he's like, whatever. He's like just talking to the kid, which I
Yeah,
think
just you
is
just need to keep
something.
your trap shut.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a funny thing. Like nowadays, you know, the thing is or seems to be in most movies that the adult treats the kid like a little kid and the little kid shows that they're world wise already. And it's kind of this funny thing that happens, but they didn't do that here. They just talk to each other
No.
like adults. And I think like when I was probably in high school, I remember going to like a party that this kid was, you know, it was at this kid's house. And I was talking to like their parents or whatever, like these adults that were there. It was a 4th of July thing.
Okay.
And they just said, like after a while, they're like, you went to a private school, didn't you? I was like, yeah, why? They're like, because kids who went to public school don't ever talk to us. And they were just saying, like, any of their friends, their kids' friends who went to a private school, which is like a really common thing in St. Louis. I know it's not like that everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
But they were just saying, like, for whatever reason, I guess like smaller class sizes or whatever, they're like, you can just tell a kid who's had adults talk to them as though they are also an adult.
Yes.
Like it's very different. And I think that's true in general. I think you would find a lot of agreement that it's better to talk to a kid like an adult.
That's how
But
I
they
do
can
that.
still be
Like,
like, I don't believe you. Monsters aren't real. Like, get over it. But then when he finds out, the father, like, he finds out the monsters are real. And he's like, all right, I'm in it. And he's like, he's not distraught. He's not like freaking out. He's like, I'm going to save my kid.
yep.
Like he fights Dracula, he wounds him at one point. I like that he like hits him mid transformation between
Yes.
bat and human, and he's like kind of messed up in his state for a second, but he gets distracted long enough that Dracula gets away. Like it adds a lot of tension, but it also adds. I don't know. It was one of those things where it's like I don't know for sure who's going to survive and who's not
Mm-hmm.
because they're not being too precious about anybody in this movie.
Yeah, there were moments in this that had a little heart to it. Like I really enjoyed the scene where so the kid wants to go to a movie, but he can't go to a movie because the parents are going to go out. They're going to go to this counseling thing to try and work on their marriage, which is important to try and work on them because the parents have to be solid. That marriage has to be solid in order for the kids to do well. If it's not, the kids aren't doing well. That's how
Mhm.
that works. Period. You can argue with me, you can whatever. That's how that works. But he gets called away, and the kid had asked, "Hey, I want to go see this movie," but he's like, "Hey, you can't because you have to babysit your sister." But you and I, we'll go to that movie tomorrow. Well, later on, the kid like goes and sits on a roof so he can like use binoculars and look in the drive-in where all the other kids are to watch
Yeah,
this
and
movie.
he's got the radio tuned to it so he can hear it and everything.
I really like how the dad shows up. He has a bag of like from burgers from somewhere. He gives this kid a burger and they just have a talk. He does. He treats him like an adult. When you mentioned that, and I agree with that because my kids, this is something I do with them. If anybody is listening and you have kids, once your kids get to a certain age, start treating them like adults. Otherwise, how are they going to know how to be adults?
Yeah.
If you treat them like a kid till they're 16, 17 years old, that's not how that works. We just had a friend of ours. It's a whole Jerry Springer-esque situation that I'm not going to get into. But the
Accurate.
mother bought her daughter a toy robot that said for ages 4 and up for a 17-year-old birthday. Do you not know your kid at all? Like, what even is that? You treat your children. I've been treating my children like adults for a number of years now. And now my 15-year-old daughter, her and I have discussions. We don't have just little teeny bopper. She says something or I say something and she gives a smart ass comment. I mean, that may happen, but her and I sit down and have discussions about things. And I just started to have discussions with my 13-year-old daughter that she's getting opinions about the world and about things in it. And I look forward to discussing things with her. But how are kids who need to become adults going to learn how to be adults if we don't treat them as adults? They're not. And there's so many people right now who are going to college. And when you're in college, you're an adult. You're not, because think about it. When you were 18, between the ages of 18 and 25, you look back on that time now when you're older than that and think, oh my God, I knew nothing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
thought I knew a bunch. I knew literally nothing about how the world worked.
Yeah.
And there's so much growing you do in that time or after that time, whatever. But nobody's going to know how to be an adult from a kid to becoming an adult if you don't start treating them that way. And I did appreciate that in this movie. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, and I like that the dynamic is different than it is now. You
Yes.
know, there's a lot of like we've praised movies before. I can't think of the specific ones, but like where, you know, you can have a strong female character who acts like a woman, who isn't just like a carbon copy of every male character that's in it. Like it's the same thing. You know what I mean? Like there was some movie we watched, it was like a spy kind of movie. I can't even remember now. But she fought differently than a man. Like she used leverage in her environment to fight because she's
Gemini Man?
no, I
Because
don't
there was
think
that
so.
fight scene with her, and she did a really good job with that. And that was an
Maybe,
impressive
maybe,
scene.
maybe that is what I'm thinking of. But yeah, it's like, and it's kind of the same thing here. Like now, when you have a kid, the kid has to be smarter than the adults. Like they
Oh my
always make the
God.
adults kind of dumber because they're trying to like play down to the kids and you know whatever, like be like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" And the kid's like, "Shut up, old man."
Right? I agree.
And I like that they don't do that here. And I think it's just something that they didn't used to do. I think it was a funny thing to have that, but now it's just what they do. And I
Yeah.
don't like that. I kind of prefer this older style. And I like how seriously they take everything. Like there are still really funny things that happen in this movie, like the way the mummy gets taken out
Oh my God,
by
that
like
was so good.
and the little kid Eugene who writes in crayon like "Dear Army guys, there are monsters, please come." And at the very end of the movie, the army shows up, like guys
Right?
march in their tanks, and they're like, "Who's Eugene?" Like,
Like in any world that would have worked. There's no way the army shows up because they got a note that
in
says,
crayon,
"Hey, there's monsters here. Where are the monsters? We're here to stop them." That was so ridiculous,
but
but
so good. It really,
I
really
loved
funny.
it. I
Yeah,
loved it.
it was a great way to end it. And I mean, there are other moments too that are serious. Like you have the brides of Dracula that are
Yep.
coming down the street, and the cool kid he he just like he's like, "I got this," and just starts walking away with his bow and stuff that he
Yep.
stole from an archery range. And they're like, "What are you gonna do?" And he's like, "I'm in the goddamn club, aren't I?" And I love that line. I love that scene. He's just like, "All right, I
Yep.
got this." Like
One of my
this,
favorite parts about that what you're talking about is back in the day, and he's in woodshop class. He like shows the teacher, "Oh, here's the thing that I built," and then he starts sharpening stakes.
yeah.
Because that's how it would work. The
And
teacher
he's
sees what you want, and then you can kind of do whatever you want after that.
yeah, and he's melting down like family silverware to make silver bullets. The only thing that bothered me there was they did
That's not
that
how
thing that
bullets work.
well, they did that thing where like movies used to like the bullet was the whole thing, like the bullet
Yes.
and the casing. I remember a lot of movies like they would show the slow motion thing of like a bullet moving and it would be the whole case and everything, not just the bullet that's at the
Oh
end.
my God.
So he was it essentially suggests that he was making silver casings along with the bullets, which is weird,
No,
but
he made
and he
silver bullets and then he popped them into his gun, but there was no gunpowder, there was no primer, there was there was no way that works, but that's how he kills the Wolfman. But
yeah.
again, that goes back to the Wolfman, the human part of the Wolfman who didn't want to be the Wolfman.
Yeah, and the kid is like, "Oh my god!" And the Wolfman's like, "Thank you, like
Yes.
thank you for finally like releasing me from this."
Right, ending what this torture is. Like, I don't want to be a killer. When I turn
Yeah,
into this creature, I'm doing things that I don't want to do. And that was a nice part of it. You've got the mummy, who's a mindless thing, the creature quote. I'm throwing air quotes here. Creature from the Black Lagoon, because they never mention the name. They write it down, but they never mention the name Dracula. Like, one of the things I found out here, looking up trivia about it, is they didn't have permission to use those characters. And so, like, the Frankenstein, he doesn't have bolts in his neck, he has bolts on his head. And
Hmm.
so they changed things just enough to where they can get away with this. But
Okay.
as I said before, I really like that back in 1987, somebody had the idea to take all of these movie creatures and try and throw them together in one thing and do something with it.
Well,
Even if it
that's
was just this kid oriented, you know, adults aren't going to believe us, so we have to step up and deal with it, kind of an adventure movie. I really like that they brought all of those together. I thought
yeah.
that was neat.
Yeah, and I like that they gave a little bit of characterization to Frankenstein's monster.
Yes, I agree with that too.
Like my honestly, the scene that got me the most, that was like real, like they like it was akin to the Holocaust tattoo, was when they were in the clubhouse with the monster and they hand him a mask of himself and he looks at it
Yes.
and he goes like, oh, and like slaps it away. Like there was just a funny scene where he's like watching the girl because he can see her because he's sitting where the cool kid usually sits, and the little girl explains that she's been teaching him to speak English and all this stuff, and he's
Mm-hmm.
watching that and he leans on this camera that's there and accidentally sets it off and it clicks and he jumps back and he's like, bogus. And then a couple seconds later they have this very natural seeming scene where they hand him this mask of himself and he slaps it and then he like gestures towards his face and he goes scary and he's all upset because he realizes that he's a monster, like he knows what he looks like to them.
Yes.
And it's yeah, and it and it makes me sad that at the end he has to go through the portal too.
It was. It was. But I really liked that. One of the things I really liked about that is they wouldn't do it nowadays.
No, there
They
would be a
wouldn't
way for him to
rip
stay.
this character who this girl, this young girl, really attached herself to. They wouldn't rip him away, which is what would happen. What happened in this movie is what would happen. And they wouldn't do that nowadays. They would find a way to circumvent that so that he could stay with her and it would all be sunshine and rainbows. But that's not real life. Real life isn't that. Real life is suffering and pain and loss. Not always, not all the time, but sometimes. Sometimes that happens. You have a parent, and all of a sudden there's a car wreck, and you no longer have one of your parents. Like, that's the kind of thing that happens. And this movie didn't shy away from that, whereas movies nowadays would not have done that. And I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciated that with this movie. It's just, oh, watching movies like this from a different time, maybe I take for granted what they do in movies like that. How they're able, not just how they're able to get away with what they say because it's a whole different time frame, things like that, which is fun to look back and to be able to, with a movie like a Mel Brooks movie, like Blazing Saddles, and they say the N word, I don't know how many times, but it's how they do it and why they do it. You need to be able to look at society and know that yes, we have differences. Yes, we feel differently about things, but that's okay. We're able to look at each other and make fun of things and have fun
Mm-hmm.
with things and that be okay and not be offended by literally everything. And it was fun to watch this movie for that. This was, I ended up being really glad that you picked this.
No good. I had fun watching it too. And honestly, my only gripes were just little, I think potentially like missed opportunities. But it wouldn't have worked
Okay.
all that well. Just because Dracula's like such a suave, sophisticated character who, I mean, the reason he's dressed the way he is that was, like the attire of an aristocrat from the time period he was supposed to be from.
Agreed.
So really, he should have shown up in something else. And there's actually a movie I really like. There's a Batman cartoon series from like the early to mid 2000s
Okay.
that there have been so many different Batman series. It wasn't the animated series, and it wasn't the one that came after that with like the Justice League and all that. It was its own thing, had its own unique style. Um, and they made a movie, a Batman versus Dracula movie. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's actually pretty fun. Like it was the last Batman show with decent animation quality because all like Warner Brothers animated movies have just the worst quality ever. Like the animation just looks
It's
so unbelievably cheap.
You're not wrong. It does sound ridiculous.
But the thing about it that I like is Dracula acts like Dracula. The first thing he does is start trying to like integrate himself into society. He dresses, a little odd, but mostly right. He explains his accent by that he's from this other place. He, tells people the right things. He learns enough to be able to get by in modern society, and he goes to like the way he encounters Bruce Wayne is he goes to a party at Wayne Manor. And I think they had a missed opportunity here with that. There could have been something where Dracula's like this guy who's already in society that maybe the kid's family encounters. But the way they did it, he's just sort of like a man on a mission instead of anything like that.
Well, just overall, man, and then okay, there are things that I could probably nitpick with this movie, but I'm not going to. It's from 1987. Like, it is what it is. Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and try and nitpick any, or this was not okay, or that was, I didn't like, that wasn't done well. I'm not doing any of that with this movie. This is what it is.
Yeah, it's a very simple and fun movie.
It is. And it's got a MacGuffin, and you have to get it, and you have to do something, and whatever with all that. This was fun. And I never watched it back, in the day when it came out. I'm glad that ended up being glad that you picked this. As I had it sitting, just waiting to do something with, to pop it in and watch it for at least a month. At least a month.
Yeah.
The library's like, hey, you gonna give us our movie back? Yeah. Eventually I'll get there. Just calm it down, whatever. But it was good. I'm glad you picked it. And movie how, as far as all you Halligans are concerned, this is going to come down to a watch or not a watch. I will say, if you are not our age, if you cannot look at this and get any sort of nostalgia out of it or appreciate it in the way that we do, like if my kids were to watch this, I don't know if they could appreciate it in the way that you and I appreciate it. I think George, my youngest son, he could appreciate it. He could have fun with it. But my daughters, they'd be like, Dad, why are you making us watch this? This is so bad. So I'm still going to say it's a watch, but it's a watch if you're in the right category to watch it. If you watch it back in the day, hey, guess what? You all already know. You know about the Monster Squad. But if you have not watched it, and I did not, I'm 40 some odd years old. Don't want to throw the exact number out there. I probably should, but whatever.
Brave.
Early 40s. And I never saw this, even though I knew about it. Everybody heard the quote, Wolfman got nards. Like everybody knew that, and I never watched it. I don't know if I would have appreciated this. I feel like I would have. There was a movie from that time frame that nobody else has ever heard of. If you have, I will be impressed. But it was called The Peanut Butter Solution. And it was about you made up this mixture that included peanut butter, and this kid put it on his head because he was bald, and it made his hair grow. And some evil person that was in it, like his hair was growing at an exponential rate. And so he was using it and cutting the hair and keeping him captive so he could use the hair and sell it or do whatever. And it was better than that. That was like a PBS kind of esque movie from the same time frame that I've never forgotten. I've never forgotten the name of the movie, The Peanut Butter Solution, mainly because there was a kid in it who reminded me of Short Round from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Yeah. And apparently he was upset because he wasn't growing pubes fast enough. And so he slathers his nether region with it, and it just exploded with hair in a way that you absolutely shouldn't, which was hilarious. but this was fun. So, Halligan's, watch this movie if you haven't. If you have a chance to watch it, it is worth a rent. Get it from the library. Do not pay a dime at all if you don't have to. But if you're going to put on something, especially, and I know now is not that time, but if you're going to put on something for a Halloween movie, this was a clever concept.
Yeah.
Back before any sort of franchises were trying to be made, back before it was turning into what Hollywood is now, and it's fun. So thank you, Ryan, for suggesting this movie. I enjoyed it much more than I thought that I would.
Hard to follow that up. I guess I'll just say it's a watch. I enjoyed it. I think it's a movie that holds up. It's fun. It's one of those things that, it's one of those things that fell between the cracks of sort of time and just like general consciousness. And it's just a fun movie. I think it's right up there, like I was saying, with Hocus Pocus. I could see it eventually becoming kind of a cult classic if more people are around to see it. I think the language is a little difficult. There are some things that are a little tough to get past. The language, the white socks and loafers, that was the thing that was like really hard for me. But yeah, I mean, really fun. It's hard to find really too much wrong with it. I do want to call out what we were talking about last time, where you thought that oh my god, I can't even think of his name. The guy from the Eternals, Don Lee. You thought it was the dude that played Wong. What is it? Benedict Wong? That's the actual actor's name, right?
Yeah.
Did I send you that meme? That was like white people, Asian people look the same, and it has Benedict Wong and Don Lee next to each other, and then it's also white people, and it's Sebastian Stan and Richard Madden, who played Icarus.
Oh my god,
next to each other. Good. They look exactly the same.
They look real similar.
So I think that might be a Marvel thing, like lighting everything the same way, cutting everybody's hair the same way. Everybody's got the short beard stubble. Like they've got a type, they've got a look that they're going for.
They do indeed.
But yeah, that's all I've got.
Oh my god, this was good. Thank you so much, Halligans. We're going to thank you once again for listening to us on Movie Howl. And you know what? I'm pretty sure he's made his recommendation. I've made mine. He's been Ryan. I've been Joe. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure we're out.
We're out.